Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Bigtime Memories. I'm Terry Sullivan, along with the manager of the Stars, photographer extraordinaire, Dave Drason.
Thank you. Good to see you people again. First and foremost, I want to thank all the fans who've been writing in, the notes and on Facebook and YouTube and private messages. They're really loving the show. We're doing the best we can, but you always got to remember, Terry, pat on the back. It's only 18 inches, from a kick in the ass. So
That's right.
We appreciate it.
That's right. Today, we're doing a special show, a special tribute, because this guy was so special to both of us, as he was to millions of fans around the world. And I think when you talk about Detroit wrestling, name the wrestlers in Detroit, Bobo and the Sheik, probably the first two top of mind. But a solid number 3 would have to be
Pampero Firpo, without a doubt. Oh, yeah.
Everybody has a Firpo impression, even Randy Savage, which we'll talk about.
Yeah. Start, Terry. Give us his real name.
Real name was Juan Cachamanyan. Cachamanyan. I hope I did justice to that. He was of Armenian nationality, raised in Buenos Aires, even though his father was Turkish.
Mm-hmm. And his father was a boxing promoter, true?
Boxing promoter in Argentina. Firpo talked about boxing, did a little bit, but thought wrestling would be more suited to him, and thank God that he made that decision.
Mm-hmm. And, Pampero was born April 6, 1930 in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and he made his wrestling debut in 1953. And he was trained by Rudy Dusick.
The Riot Squad, one of the Dusick brothers.
Right.
There are about 4 of those brothers who terrorized rings around the country.
And before, he settled on the name Pampero Firpo, in the early days, he wrestled as Irvin the Armenian, the Missing Link, and Ivan the Terrible of all names.
Why didn't he stick with Irvin the Armenian? I mean,
well, we're glad he didn't.
Yeah.
But the boxer Jack Dempsey gave Pampero the name Pampero Firpo after the great boxing champion Louis Firpo.
That's right. Yeah. Jack Dempsey, he knew from his occasional forays into the wrestling world as a special guest enforcer type referee.
Mm-hmm. And, he made his Detroit debut on December 4th, 1971 against Jesse the Bull Ortega.
Yeah.
Not a memorable match that I can remember. I remember seeing it, but I don't remember it that well. But Pampero Firpo made an instant impression on me and the sellout crowd at Cobo Arena.
Yeah, you could just tell this was a star. I knew of him before he came in, but really didn't appreciate the response that he engendered from the crowd. Here's a new face, most of whom didn't know him, most of whom didn't read the wrestling magazines. There was no internet back then, but this guy was classic. He was one of a kind. And the interviews were always so special.
Yeah. Well, when I would, see the wrestling magazines, Wrestling Review, Wrestling World, the After, magazines. He was either out in San Francisco working for Roy Shire and then really started to make a name for himself in the AWA in Vern Gagne's territory. Yeah. And it's like, wow, it would be really great to see this guy, and in, 1971, when he first came to Cobo, we got to see the real deal. And when he came, he wasn't there all the time because he still had commitments for Vince McMahon Sr. in New York. So he was, fulfilling those commitments, dates that he had to do. So the only time he was in big time wrestling was in Detroit or Toronto. He wasn't in our other, cities, like Lansing and Toledo and Cincinnati, Dayton, and so many other towns of big time wrestling. But he came in full-time in 1972. And then from then on, history was made with Pampero Firpo and, big-time wrestling.
People still talk about his matches with Tex McKenzie, where Tex McKenzie was a real bloodbath. Notable matches against Bobo for the United States Championship when Bobo held the belt. He was a top challenger. Johnny Valentine, Igor, Bull Curry, and Pampero Firpo.
Oh, boy.
Match made in heaven or hell.
Yeah.
He had some classics.
Yeah, and he first started out here as a heel, a bad guy. And then I think it was when him and the Sheik were tag teaming, and then that team just broke up and exploded somehow, and Pampero Firpo just became a, fan favorite,
right.
All through the territory very quickly.
And boy, was he. I mean, he was on the main events pretty much everywhere against some of the names we mentioned before.
Yeah, when he came into big time wrestling in 1972, he bought a home in Owasso, Michigan, settled in with his wife and 3 children, John, Mary, and Julie. And we no longer have Julie. She died of an illness at a young age. So John still lives in California. I think Mary lives there also. And I've done a recent interview with her also. And oh, what a stunning beauty she is. I can't believe it. That she came out of Pampero's loins.
Well, luckily, she got her mother's genes.
You got that right.
Yeah. I remember when Firpo, before he bought the home in Owasso, he lived in an apartment in Toledo, and he was brand new to the area, and he was somewhat directionally challenged, let's say. So he'd get in his car, and one night he's booked in Fort Wayne. So that should be a fairly easy trip west from Toledo. But instead, something put him on the Ohio Turnpike, and I think when he got to Cleveland, it occurred to him that, this doesn't look like Indiana.
Yeah, you're only 90 miles in the wrong direction. So that Fort Wayne trip became, instead of a 2-hour drive, that was a 4 to 5 hour drive.
Yeah. And everybody remembers El Garfield.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes, when he'd do the interviews, he would paint his fingernails black.
Take magic marker.
Yeah. Yeah, and he'd hold it up to the camera, and and you can't forget his, sidekick. Oh, his little mentor, Chimu.
Yes, the shrunken head.
And I found out from Mary that Chimu still exists.
Really?
She found him in a little box of, her father's, wrestling gear and stuff.
I'll be darned. And we talked about the and the fact that Randy Savage really did pick that part of his vocabulary, his wrestling vocabulary, from Firpo. And when Firpo was in Hawaii as the missing link, Randy and Lanny's dad, Angelo, came into Hawaii to wrestle Firpo, and Randy and Lanny were with him, watched the interviews on TV where Firpo would do the and like everybody, imitated, had his own Pampero Firpo impression, and carry that on throughout his time as the Macho Man.
And you mentioned some of the talent that he worked against. He was only 5'8" tall, so he wasn't big in stature like Valentine and Tex McKenzie, who towered over him. But he took on all comers.
Yeah.
And to his credit, he held the United States Heavyweight Championship, the belt, 3 different times. He beat Bobo Brazil twice over his career, and he beat the Sheik once. So he held the title 3 times in this area.
Not very many people can say they wore the United States Heavyweight Championship.
No.
Especially 3 times.
Yeah, I think, between the Sheik and Bobo, Firpo 3 times, Valentine, he had it originally. When the Sheik bought the territory, Johnny Valentine held the belt, and the Sheik, beat Johnny Valentine to become, the big time wrestling, United States Heavyweight Champion.
Yep, and Firpo really deserved it, though, because he was just so excellent, such an attraction. He was a moneymaker. He really put butts in seats.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And, after, I'd say, 1975 through 1980, at the ending years of big-time wrestling, he appeared sporadically. He'd come in, do a shot here and there, but he wasn't, a steady performer in the area anymore. But he did come back for 2 shows in 1980, and one of those matches that he, went against Dirty Dick Murdoch, of all people.
Oh, yeah?
But he did work in 1978 and 1979 for the Bear Man, Dave McKegney, through all the towns in Ontario.
The smaller towns that he did up, small but profitable.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, after a long career, starting in 1953, now you're into the 80s, 30 years of, wear and tear on your body. He was starting to, slow down,
Sure.
only take a few, shots here and there. But he worked a few shows for Roy Shire, near his home in San Francisco. And I know one of his last matches was a battle royal. And then he ended up retiring in 1986 after what, his family says is 8,882 matches over his career.
And I believe that of all the people to keep records, it would be Pampero Firpo. He was very meticulous about everything in his life, the way he dressed as well as his financial records, things like that.
But even though, he retired from wrestling, he didn't retire from life.
No.
He ended up going to work for the post office in San Jose, California for a number of years.
Right. Like a lot of wrestlers, they're old enough, or they're too old to wrestle, but they're not old enough to retire. And wrestlers, as independent contractors, don't have health insurance.
Right.
And Firpy had the family and everything, so he made a very intelligent decision, I believe, going to work for the government, working in post office in San Jose. And interestingly enough, something that Firpo did is work in the bulk mail division in San Jose, and every Sunday would have delivered to him thousands and thousands of the Wrestling Observer newsletters.
Wow.
Which he helped process, and retired from the post office in 2008 when he was 78 years old.
Wow. That's a heck of a time to finally take a pension, really.
I guess so. Yeah. Yeah.
But, the thing about, we had, many, times together with him, away from wrestling in the ring, and, some great conversations with Pampero.
Yeah.
And, when I was on road trips with him, it was always a joy. I learned so much because I was such a young kid. I was only 17, 18 years old.
Yeah.
And we didn't talk about wrestling on the road.
Uh-huh.
We would talk about education and travel, and he would teach me about all the places that he'd been, which in my mind, I have to go to these places. And fortunately, over my lifetime, I did. And I, thank him, in my own mind, every time I'm in a foreign country that, he inspired me to go there.
Yeah, he was very into different cultures and an appreciation of people and their beliefs and their customs, found them fascinating. Spoke 8 languages, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I can barely speak, English,
Right.
And I did take, in high school, 3 years of Spanish, so if ever I, in a foreign country and they don't speak English, sometimes I'll say it in Spanish. And they'll understand, because sometimes Spanish and Italian and German, some of those words cross each other, and I can form a conversation with somebody that way. So
one thing that I remember so distinctly about Firpo is his absolute, the way he adored his children and his family, his wife at the time. And I remember his son, John, was the oldest and wasn't very old when he first came to Toledo. And I say, Firpy, how is Johnny? Oh, and he could just melt. The love that he had for his family was just something to, for everybody to emulate.
You wouldn't think his persona that he portrayed, in the ring and on screen during promos, that he would be this loving father.
Yeah.
But, so many other wrestlers are like that, away from, wrestling, they're gentle teddy bears, as opposed to what you may see, them live and on screen.
And I got to think that's one of the reasons that he stepped away from wrestling, because he probably could have kept on and drawn some houses here and there. But, the family was the most important thing. Being with them, watching them grow was his priority.
And one thing I, always say about, Pampero, and I can probably count on, both hands, wrestlers that I could say this about. But in the dressing room and talking to the boys, I've never heard a bad word spoken about Pampero Firpo. And that says really something about the man.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I want to remind the fans that his son does have a Twitter account and responds to it. It's at pfirpo1. If you'd like to look that up, I subscribe and find it very interesting.
Yeah, and he was the Pampero. After a great long career, he was rewarded for that, career by being inducted into the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2018. He was there, spoke with the fans and stuff, but he was getting a little dementia, so it was hard for him to remember things and communicate. But he did show up, and I didn't know he was going to show up there.
Really?
And I've been to a number of the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame functions, and if I would have known he would have been there, I would have went. And I'm sorry to this day that I didn't, and sorry that not long after that he passed away on January 9th. In the year 2020, so not that long ago. And what a great career. What a great man. Yeah. I mean, the accolades, we could, just bestow on him, we can go on for hours and hours. Absolutely one of a kind. 89 years old, died of natural causes just a little over a year ago. Yeah. And Terry, in memoriam of Pampero Firpo, if you can give him one last ring announcement, like you always did.
Oh, my honor. From Argentina, weighing 240 pounds, the wild bull of the Pampas, the eighth wonder of the world, Pampero Firpo.
Oh, yeah.
Really proud to say that I'm a part of IBW.
I take pride in IBW that we are a family-run company.
It's a fight. It's a sport. At IBW, tradition has always mattered.
You're going to see world-class professional big-time wrestling at its best.
This ain't no sports entertainment. This is professional wrestling.
International big-time wrestling's The Fix. Each and every week, your fix of IBW action. You want entertainment? Look no further than Rocks TV. International big-time wrestling!
Wrestling fans, if you like what you've seen, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also don't forget to ring that bell.